The empty seat. Clara Whitmore arrived at St. Alden's Academy on the first day of the January term. The snow so thick it swallowed the sound of her taxi tires before the vehicle had even stopped at the wrought iron gates. She was 38, newly divorced, and carrying nothing but 2 suitcases and the fragile hope that 300 miles north of everything she had ever known might finally muffle the echo of her husband's last words. "You were never really here anyway." The academy crouched on a narrow spit of land between Black Lock and Blacker Pine Forest, its gray stone walls veined with ice, its single bell tower lost in low cloud. A place built in 1872 for the sons of Highland lairds and still, somehow, refusing to let the 20th century fully arrive. The headmaster, Mr. McGregor, met her in the entrance hall. His handshake was brief and cold. "You're replacing Mrs. Lennox," he said, not quite looking at her. "She left rather suddenly. The Year 9 English class is particular. Room 12. Don't change the seating plan." Clara asked why. McGregor's smile was thin. Tradition. She was given the keys, a timetable, and a warning not to walk the grounds after dark. By the time she reached room 12, the corridors were already empty. The boarders had vanished into dormitories like smoke. The classroom smelled of chalk, damp wool, and something sweeter, old paper and candle wax. 24 desks faced the blackboard in perfect rows. The 25th, at the very back by the tall window, stood empty. Its surface was polished to a dull sheen. A small brass plate on the lid read simply, "Reserved." Clara set her bag down and opened the register. Every name had been entered in neat blue ink except one. In the final row, under the date January 14th, 2004, the name Thomas A. Calder had been written and then crossed out so violently the paper had torn. Beside it, in a different hand, someone had added a single red grade, A+. She closed the book. Outside, the snow kept falling. The first lesson passed without incident. The students, 14-year-olds with the pale, watchful faces of children who had grown up knowing winter could kill, answered her questions politely but never once glanced toward the empty seat. When she asked who usually sat there, a girl named Isla Ross answered without blinking, "No one sits there, miss. It's tradition." At 4 o'clock, Clara locked the door and walked back to the small flat above the stables that had been assigned to her. She made tea, graded the first set of comprehension exercises, and tried not to think about the divorce papers still unsigned in her suitcase. At 11:07 p.m., the power flickered. She told herself it was the storm. At 11:59 p.m., she heard it, soft scratching from the direction of the main building, like a pen moving across paper. She told herself it was the wind. The next morning the snow had stopped, but the sky remained the color of wet slate. Room 12 was exactly as she had left it except for one thing. On the reserved desk lay a single sheet of lined paper. The handwriting was careful, childish, the letters slightly slanted. Title: The New Teacher. The new teacher will come in January. She will be sad. She will try to be kind. On the third night she will read what I write and she will understand that some seats are never empty. She will try to leave but the snow will not let her. She will stay until the fire comes again. Clara's hands shook as she read. She looked up. The class was filing in. Not one of them reacted to the paper. She folded it, slipped it into her pocket, and began the lesson on Macbeth with a voice that sounded steadier than she felt. That afternoon she went to the school archive in the basement. The files were dusty and incomplete, but she found the 2004 incident report. On January 14th, a fire had started in the chemistry lab and spread with unnatural speed. 6 boys had died, trapped on the upper floor. One of them, Thomas Calder, aged 14, had been in room 12 when the flames reached the corridor. The report noted that he had been writing an essay at the time. The essay had never been found. Clara closed the folder. Her mouth tasted of ash. That night the scratching returned, louder. She took a torch and walked the empty corridors. Room 12 was unlocked, though she remembered locking it. Inside, the reserved desk now held 3 more sheets. First essay: the teacher will find the register and see my name. She will feel sorry for me. Second, she will ask the students and they will lie because they are afraid I will choose one of them instead. Third, tonight she will dream of the fire. She will wake up screaming my name. Clara did not sleep. When she did finally drift off at dawn, she dreamed of corridors filled with smoke, of a boy in gray uniform standing at a blackboard writing the date January 14th, 2004 over and over while flames licked the hem of his blazer. The third day, the students arrived wearing coats and scarves indoors. The heating had failed overnight. Clara tried to ignore the way they kept their eyes fixed on their books. When she collected the homework, she found an extra essay on top of the pile. Same handwriting. Title: The Teacher's Choice. She can burn the register tonight and I will be free. Or she can keep teaching and the fire will come back exactly as it did before. The snow will trap everyone. The doors will not open. I only need one teacher to take my place at the desk. Then the rest can leave. Clara read it twice, then walked straight to the headmaster's office. McGregor was not surprised. He poured her a whiskey she did not want. Mrs. Lennox lasted 6 weeks, he said quietly. The one before her lasted 9 days. Every January a new English teacher arrives. Every January the seat waits. Thomas Calder was a brilliant boy, top of every class. On the night of the fire, he stayed behind to finish an essay about forgiveness. The flames reached him before he could write the last line. Since then, the school has never been able to fill that seat. The children know. They leave the papers for whoever sits at the front. The teacher always reads them. The teacher always tries to leave. The snow always thickens. And on the 14th, the fire always returns. In dreams first, then in the walls. Clara set the glass down untouched. Why me? Because you're running from something, McGregor said. The seat only chooses teachers who have unfinished business of their own. She walked back through the snow that was already falling again. In room 12, the reserve desk now held a single new sheet. Title: Tonight. Burn the register and I will be gone by morning. Or teach the lesson I never finished. The choice is yours, Miss Whitmore, but choose quickly. The clock is already at 11:59. Clara stood in the empty classroom for a long time. She could hear the scratching again. Steady, patient. The sound of a boy who had been waiting 20 years for someone to read the last line of his essay. She did not burn the register. Instead, she sat at the teacher's desk and began to write. The next morning, the snow was a wall. Roads were closed. The academy was cut off from the world. The students moved through their lessons like sleepwalkers. At break time, Isla Ross approached Clara in the corridor. You read them, didn't you, miss? The girl whispered. We all do. Every year. We write what we think he wants to hear so he won't pick us. But he only ever wants the teacher. Clara asked what happened to the teachers who chose to burn the register. Isla's eyes filled with tears. They leave the next morning, but one of the students always disappears instead. Usually the one who sat closest to the empty seat. We take turns being kind to the new ones so it won't be us. Clara felt the floor tilt. And the teachers who don't burn it? They stay until January 14th. Then the fire comes. Not real fire, not this time. But the smoke is real. The screaming is real. And in the morning, one teacher is gone and the seat is empty again. Waiting for the next January. Clara spent the rest of the day reading every surviving essay Thomas had ever written. They were extraordinary, sensitive, funny, wise beyond his years. In the final one, dated January 14th, 2004, he had begun. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to sit in the empty seat so someone else can stand up and leave. The handwriting stopped mid-sentence. The paper was singed at the bottom edge. That night Clara did not go to her flat. She stayed in room 12 with every light burning. At 11:59, the scratching began again. This time she answered it. She walked to the reserve desk, sat down, and opened a fresh exercise book. She wrote, "Dear Thomas, I am sorry I was not here 20 years ago. I am sorry the fire took you before you could finish your last line. I have read everything you left behind. You were right. Forgiveness is sitting in the empty seat. So I am sitting here now. Teach me the rest of the lesson." The scratching stopped. The room grew warm. On the blackboard, letters began to appear by themselves, written in the same careful hand. Lesson 1. The fire is not coming for the building. It is coming for unfinished stories. Lesson 2. Every teacher who has sat here has tried to run. None of them understood that running leaves the story unfinished. Lesson 3. You are the last teacher, Miss Whitmore. Your divorce, your father's death last year, the book you never wrote, those are your empty seats. Fill them. Clara's eyes stung. She wrote back, "How?" The board answered, "Tell the children the truth. Then on the 14th night, read my essay aloud to them. Every word. When you reach the place where I stopped, finish the sentence for me." She asked what the sentence was. The board stayed blank for a long moment. Then one word appeared: forgive. The days that followed were the strangest of Clara's life. She taught as she had never taught before, openly, fiercely, as though every lesson might be the last. She told the students about her failed marriage, about the father who had died before she could say she was sorry, about the novel she had started at 23 and abandoned. The children listened with the solemn attention of people who had always known they were living inside someone else's unfinished story. They began leaving their own small confessions on the reserve desk each morning. A girl admitted she had pushed her brother down the stairs when she was 7. A boy confessed he had stolen money from the chapel collection to buy cigarettes. Each confession was answered by a new essay from Thomas. Gentle, never judging, always ending with the same question. What will you do with the rest of your story? On January 13th, the snow stopped. The forecast said the roads would open the next morning. McGregor found Clara in the staff room and offered her a way out. "A car can reach you before dawn," he said. "Leave tonight. The seat will take one of the children instead. It always has a choice." Clara looked at him for a long time. "No," she said. "I think I've been running long enough." That night she gathered every student in room 12. They sat on the floor, on windowsills, anywhere except the reserve desk. Clara placed Thomas's final essay on the lectern. She read it aloud from beginning to end, her voice steady even when it wanted to break. When she reached the place where the paper had been singed, she did not stop. She wrote the missing line in her own handwriting on a fresh sheet and read it into the silence. "Forgive yourself, and the fire will have nothing left to burn." The room grew bright, not with flames, never flames, but with a soft golden light that came from nowhere and everywhere. The children gasped. On the reserved desk, the brass plate glowed, then faded. The word reserved disappeared as though it had never been engraved. Thomas Calder stood there. He was exactly as the photographs had shown him. Gray blazer, tousled brown hair, eyes older than 14. He smiled at Clara, a small, grateful smile, and spoke for the first and only time. "Thank you, miss. I can finish my story now." He walked to the blackboard, picked up a piece of chalk that was not there a moment earlier, and wrote a single date, January 14th, 2025. Beneath it he added, "The end." Then he was gone. The light faded. The children blinked as though waking from a long dream. Isla Ross began to cry quietly. Clara closed the register. Thomas Calder's name was no longer crossed out. It was simply there with a final grade written in fresh ink. A+. The next morning the roads were clear. The snow had melted as though it had never fallen. Parents arrived to collect children who suddenly seemed lighter, as though they had put down weights they had carried since they were small. McGregor met Clara at the gate. "You did what none of the others could," he said. "You stayed." Clara looked back at the academy. Room 12's window was open. On the sill sat a single sheet of paper. She walked over and picked it up. It was blank except for one line in Thomas's handwriting. "P.S. Your novel isn't finished either, miss. I left the first chapter on your desk. The rest is up to you." Clara laughed once. A short, surprised sound that felt like the first real breath she had taken in years. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. She did not leave that day. She stayed for the rest of the term. She taught with the window open even when the wind was cold. Every morning she found new pages on her desk. Careful, beautiful chapters written in a boy's hand about a woman who had once been afraid to finish her own story. She wrote back, scene by scene, until the novel was complete. On the last day of term, the children gave her a gift. A new brass plate for the desk in the back row. It read simply Thomas A. Calder, class of 2004. Clara hung it herself. Years later, when former students returned to St. Albans for reunions, they would find Clara still there, older, grayer, but never tired. They would visit room 12 and see the desk no longer empty. A boy in a gray blazer sometimes sat there during lessons, taking notes, smiling when the teacher read a particularly good sentence aloud. The children never minded. They knew the seat had been reserved for a very long time. And every January 14th, without fail, the school bell rang once at midnight. Not in mourning, but in celebration. The fire never came back. The snow never trapped anyone again. The stories were finished. Clara Whitmore had finally learned the last lesson Thomas Calder had waited 20 years to teach. Some seats stay empty until someone is brave enough to sit in them and write the end.